Hi everyone, welcome back at Charlotte from at Charlotte's House. Today I'm going to share with you some of the things I learned playing around with epoxy resin. Stay tuned. I have partnered with MAS Epoxy. They were generous enough to send me quite a bit of resin to play around with, and I have learned what to do and what not to do. The basics of epoxy resin are as follows. You are mixing a hardener with the resin, and that is what forms the epoxy that we love to work with. Now, this mixing ratio, it might be 1:1, it might be 3:1. That will depend on the brand epoxy with which you are working. There are lots of different ways that you can measure epoxy. It has come recommended to me that you should probably do it by weight, ideally, because the volume may not be accurate. Once you have measured your epoxy and you are confident that you have the right ratio, you need to make sure that you are mixing it for the recommended amount of time. I typically mix mine for at least 2 minutes. I set a timer so I know I'm not going to cheat, and that has worked so far for me. Another thing I will mention about epoxy is that it is not clean. I have newspaper everywhere. Typically, I'm using disposable cups. I want to have rubber gloves. I use wooden paint stirrers. Cover your work area carefully. I ordered a bunch of bracelet molds on Amazon. These are all silicone. They were all really inexpensive. You want to have some syringes on hand. These molds are a little bit small in particular. You can try your hand at pouring it directly from the cup, but I really liked having a syringe, so I suggest hopping on Amazon, ordering a batch. You could probably sweet talk your pharmacist. I have done both, but that is my next tip when making specifically these jewelry projects. There's a couple different ways that you can tint epoxy. You can use a powdered pigment or you can use a liquid dye. The powder is a little bit more opaque, so depending on what you're doing, you may not want that. For the bangles that I made, I am using the liquid dye and I am just dropping it directly into the epoxy before it cures, and then I use a skewer to sort of manipulate it a little bit. The one thing that I am still trying to work through is that you'll notice that there is a little bit of a flat area, which was the top of the mold. And that's simply because of the physics of liquid. There's a little bit of a meniscus. I think if I go back and add a slight layer of epoxy on the top, I can find a way to have this be a little bit rounded. Let's look at these guys. This was the first batch I made. I removed them from the mold a little bit too soon. I want you to notice that these are an oval shape. Because they were still a little bit malleable when I removed them from the mold, I was able to take some painter's tape and sort of hold them in place. Last but not least, these are my cuffs. Couple things I learned with the cuff. I had the same issue along the top, so I had to experiment with that. And the only mistake I made the entire time I was working with these bracelet molds in the epoxy was I must have added too much pigment to this one. You see how the color is super saturated around here? So as a result, it must have thrown off the chemistry of the epoxy, and I can feel that it's a little bit squishy. I love the way these bracelets turned out. I am so pleased with how the pigment looks in the clear resin. This was a home run. I'm really happy with the results. I will definitely be wearing these a lot. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and have a great day, everyone.